On this Friday night, extradition for a former fashion executive. Some vindication for the alleged victims of Peter Nygård.
I want people to see who he really is and what a monster he is.
The new series of charges he's facing. Prime Minister Trudeau's trip on the first Truth and Reconciliation Day triggers trouble.
He doesn't care about our rights.
Alberta's doctors and nurses struggling under the crush of COVID-19.
You feel like you're drowning.
What's holding up the help from the feds? And the eye of a storm.
No ship wants to be inside a hurricane.
Unprecedented footage from within one of the Earth's most violent phenomena.
Global National with Donna Friesen. Reporting tonight, Farah Nasser.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us. Disgraced former Canadian fashion mogul Peter Nygård is facing new charges in Canada, multiple counts of sexual assault and forcible confinement. The 80-year-old appeared in a Winnipeg court today via video link on the slew of American charges he's facing. And his extradition hearing was live streamed. Cameras are rarely allowed inside Canadian courtrooms, and for Nygård's alleged victims, it was a bittersweet moment.
I see a weak, frail old man who is also a monster. Hearing his voice brought back a lot for me. It brought me back 23 years ago. Yeah, it's amazing that all of that time has passed, but it can bring you back to that moment where you were terrified.
Global's Brittany Greenslade conducted that interview, and she's been following the case since Nygard's arrest last year. She joins me now. Brittany.
Farah, this was the public's first look at Peter Nygård inside a Winnipeg jail cell. And the first time since his arrest on sex trafficking charges, we've heard him speak.
Order committal on the single charge and the authority to proceed, namely trafficking in persons. Is that correct, Mr. Nygard?
That's correct, yes.
So you understand the significance of this document that you signed, Mr. Nygard?
Yes, I do.
Peter Nygård is no longer fighting extradition to the United States. His legal team is trying to speed that process up. Perhaps that's because while Nygård faces 9 counts in the Southern District of New York, he's consented only to be extradited for trial on a single trafficking charge there.
This whole process was about him having a trial in the United States, and his hope and ours is that he'll be vindicated. That's the reason that this process was expedited.
Or it may have more to do with the 9 criminal charges Nygård faces in Toronto for sexual assault and forcible confinement. Nygård has dozens of accusers who've reported decades of abuse. Friday's developments represent progress for some.
With every step that's moving forward in this case, it does lift a little bit of anger and sadness from me. Just knowing that maybe there is justice.
But also reopen decades-old pain.
Every time something comes around with this case, it's reopening a 23-year-old wound.
Renewed criminal action against Nygard has left others feeling they no longer need to remain silent. Toronto therapist Shannon Maroney says she's supporting more than 40 alleged victims in Canada and the U.S. who for years thought they were alone and wouldn't be believed.
So many have just said, I am coming forward now because I know I'm not alone. And my story will support the stories, my experience will support the experiences of my survivor sisters, whoever they are.
Nygard's lawyers are hoping the extradition process will conclude later this year. It'll be up to the federal justice minister whether Nygard must face the Canadian charges first. Brittany Greenslade, Global News, Winnipeg.
Nygard is accused of using his influence in the fashion industry to lure women and girls. He founded his company in Winnipeg in 1967. It grew from a partial stake in a garment manufacturer to a brand name sold in stores around the world. At one point, it was the largest producer of women's clothing in Canada. Nygard International filed for bankruptcy last year. Prime Minister Trudeau is taking heat over how he spent Canada's first National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. Instead of attending one of many events yesterday, he was at a beach in Tofino, BC with his wife. As David Akin reports, the decision has angered and saddened many Indigenous leaders.
We saw an outpouring of empathy and compassion from across the country, coast to coast, from Canadians wearing orange, taking action, and our Prime Minister was missing in action.
Anger, disappointment, frustration from Indigenous leaders.
We were very shocked and very disappointed, and we don't understand how it's possible that he could not have taken the time to be publicly present for such an important day.
Very disrespectful, and you know, it represents a slap in the face to the families of residential school victims.
Residential schools that were... Leaders of the First Nation in Kamloops, BC, had sent 2 invitations to Trudeau to join them at their ceremony Thursday. Trudeau has not visited the community since burial sites were discovered on the grounds of the former residential school there.
I am truly saddened that he was not able to join us today. I did hold out on hope that maybe that he would be here.
Trudeau's plane, a Royal Canadian Air Force Challenger, left the national capital at 7 a.m. Ottawa time, and by 6:30 a.m. Pacific time, he was within a couple of hundred kilometers of Kamloops, where the ceremonies would begin at 9 a.m. But he flew right over, landing at Tofino shortly after 10 a.m. local time.
Why not in person, sir?
Trudeau and his wife are then seen hiking the beach near the $18 million oceanside home that they have rented. It's a home dubbed Surfer's Paradise. In a tweet late Thursday, Trudeau explained he did spend time on the phone Thursday talking to residential school survivors. His office said he spoke to 8 individuals, but that explanation was not completely satisfactory for political critics like newly elected Métis MP Blake Desjardins.
And I'll give Justin Trudeau the benefit of the doubt. Maybe he was reflecting and listening while on the beaches of Tofino, but I just greatly feel as though many folks don't, and it sends the wrong message.
And now, Farah, some Indigenous leaders are calling on the Prime Minister to issue a formal apology for his trip to Tofino.
David Akin in Ottawa. Thank you, David. To the pandemic now, the federal government says help is on the way for Alberta and resources are on standby for Saskatchewan if they're requested. Alberta's been dealing with more than 1,000 new cases a day for weeks, and ICU wards are almost twice their capacity. The Canadian Armed Forces and the Red Cross are sending medical staff to help overwhelmed hospitals. But as Jamie Mauracher reports, there's no word on when that help will arrive.
Riding his bike provides a rare quiet moment these days for Edmonton-based ICU doctor Darren Markland.
You're working so hard that you feel like you're drowning. And that is only because of the need to manage our resources now.
Exhausted resources and workers. ICUs in Alberta are bursting at the seams, operating in emergency mode. The federal government has been offering to help for weeks. Finally, Premier Jason Kenney accepted, but it will take time to get human resources and skilled workers there.
It depends on the details from Alberta. We are waiting to hear who they need and where and what kinds of professionals.
And right now, there is no time to waste.
In Alberta and Saskatchewan, we really need a all hands on deck approach. We need to have public health strategies that impact everyone, unfortunately, right now, so that we can bring the numbers down.
The president of the Canadian Medical Association is calling for a lockdown, and she isn't alone. Canada's top doctor says without vaccines, coupled with new restrictions, modeling shows cases will continue to climb and critical care units will overflow.
You have to reapply some public health measures because that's the fastest way to suppress the transmission by reducing contacts while the vaccine coverage is being elevated.
Premier Kenney has squashed any rumors of lockdowns in Alberta, and there's no word on restrictions in Saskatchewan, 2 provinces that alone make up 42% of the country's ICU cases.
Our standard of care is dropping. There is no way that we can keep the accelerated matted to the floor for this long and not blow the engine out. A
once avoidable crash the entire country is watching as it happens. Jamie Mauracher, Global News, Toronto.
There's only one province without a vaccine mandate for healthcare workers, and even that may be changing. The Newfoundland and Labrador government is in talks with unions, and a mandate could be announced next week. Employees who choose not to be vaccinated in Ontario, PEI, New Brunswick, Manitoba, and Saskatchewan can opt to be tested regularly instead. Those who refuse to get vaccinated in Quebec, Nova Scotia, Alberta, and BC can be suspended or put on unpaid leave. Now, there are two sides to this debate, but as Mike Armstrong reports, both agree on one thing: losing staff will have an impact.
After 18 months of strain, Quebec's healthcare system may be looking at a little more just around the corner. The clock is ticking down to the October 15th deadline for healthcare workers to be vaccinated, and some are warning that mandate won't come without a cost.
Our biggest worry right now is that we won't have enough staff to give proper care to the population.
Christina Hoare is with the Nurses Union. She represents about 3,400 nurses in the regional health board that covers Montreal's West Island. Right now, Hoare says about 7% of her members aren't vaccinated, but that in the middle of a pandemic, they can't afford to lose them.
Right now, with those 7% on the floor, we're missing staff at a critical level. So removing 7% more is just going to make things a whole lot worse.
They will not be able to work.
Quebec's health minister says the province isn't changing its mind. Christian Dubé says about 16,000 healthcare workers still aren't vaccinated, but he says things are going in the right direction. 300 to 400 healthcare workers are getting their first dose each day.
If they get their first dose immediately over the next few days, the penalty of not receiving their salary will be limited.
Now, speed is one of the criticisms out there. Some of the health unions say they support the vaccination mandate, but that the deadline was too quick. They say it's left members nervous. The pressure they're feeling is about to get worse.
Obviously, that's a worry. People have been working at 150% since a year and a half now.
It will have an impact, but it's not going to be like huge. I mean,
Dr. Gilbert Boucher represents emergency medicine specialists. He says contingencies are already being made to work around the people who'll be missing. But Boucher says the mandate is needed to protect patients. A vaccinated doctor or nurse can still catch COVID and be contagious, but much more so if they're unvaccinated.
When we do testing on people, I mean, if you're double vaccinated, you're infected, we detect a little bit of virus. But if you're not vaccinated, it's millions and millions of virion you're shooting everywhere.
Letters are going out right now in Quebec to unvaccinated healthcare workers. The health minister says it's to make it clear the mandate is happening and they're going to be without a paycheck soon. Mike Armstrong, Global News, Montreal.
Global News gets exclusive access inside Moderna's facility. Coming up, the drug maker's mission to stay ahead of COVID-19. Plus, pleas to cut the red tape, the bureaucratic nightmare for Afghan refugees. A U.S. drug maker has released data showing its experimental COVID-19 pill reduced hospitalizations and deaths by half in people recently infected with the virus. Merck says it will soon apply for emergency use authorization in the United States and around the world. The drug would be the first pill shown to be effective against COVID-19 and a major advance in the fight against the pandemic. All currently approved treatments need to be given as injections of IV infusions. Health experts say vaccines are still the best way we can protect ourselves from COVID-19, but the virus is changing, and pharmaceutical companies are trying to keep up. Our Carolyn Jarvis recently traveled to Moderna's production hub just outside of Boston. She got an exclusive look at how the company is keeping pace with the pandemic.
To say Moderna is growing by the minute wouldn't be fast enough.
We're right now in manufacturing around 1,000 employees. We have doubled in about 5 months, and we're trying to hire about 500 more as we speak right now.
Its technology center just outside of Boston feels like a headquarters from Silicon Valley. They refer to it as a campus with neighborhoods. And this is where Moderna's COVID-19 vaccine was first made.
And that all started right here? All started right here.
Every step of making an mRNA vaccine is checked and rechecked.
This is actually technology that's used by the NFL to track performance of athletes.
A receiver mounted on the ceiling tracks operators through a sensor in their ID badge. So employees who are assigned to work in one drug product area each meticulously color-coded and taped off, don't cross over into another.
We will be able to have an alarm that tells us that they went a place they shouldn't go.
Wow.
Yeah, it's important.
While Moderna continues to supply vaccine around the world, it's also focusing on how the virus is changing.
Do you have teams of people back there trying to forecast where the next variant may occur?
Oh, absolutely. The moment there's the first posting of a new sequence to the international databases, we download that, we look at all of the different mutations that emerged, and we ask ourselves the question, is this the canary in the coal mine? Is this the one that we're worried about?
Moderna currently has 6 different boosters in development, including one targeting the Delta variant.
Delta surprised us. Delta as a variant is far more transmissible. But fortunately, Delta is not an immune escape variant. And what I mean by that, it's not one that has really hidden itself from our vaccines or our immune systems.
The variant Moderna is most concerned about is one we fortunately haven't seen yet. An immune escape variant which is highly transmissible that could evade our vaccines.
That one sequence that looks like it combines all the mutations that scare us the most will be the one that we have to run towards as fast as possible.
Carolyn Jarvis, Global News, Boston.
Carolyn also speaks with some of Canada's leading scientists about how the vaccines are holding up and why they say it may not be time for a booster just yet. That's tomorrow at 7 when the new reality returns for a new season right here on Global. Still ahead, the desperate calls for Canada to fast-track help for Afghans waiting in danger. Singers Andra Day and Andrea Bocelli were part of a big opening ceremony to kick off the Middle East's first World's Fair. After a year's delay due to the pandemic, Expo 2020 is now welcoming visitors. The 6-month-long exhibition features more than 190 countries, including Canada. A massive futuristic landscape was created in what was not too long ago a barren desert. 1 month ago, the Taliban took full control of Kabul airport. Canadian aircraft helped 3,700 people leave, but hundreds of Canadian citizens or permanent residents were left behind. And many thousands more vulnerable Afghans with links to Canada are still inside the country. Global News spoke to a former Canadian Forces interpreter who managed to get his Canadian visa and made it to Pakistan with his family. Like so many others, he says he still fears for those still in Afghanistan. Redmond Shannon reports.
Hidden among the Taliban-controlled streets of Kabul is a network of safe houses, now home to 2,000 Afghan men, women and children who had hoped to get out of the country during the chaos of August's airlifts. They're some of the country's most vulnerable, and those who worked with the Canadian Forces and NGOs. The safe houses are funded by donations organised by a Canadian veterans group. Veterans say just a few hundred Afghans have escaped into Pakistan since August, with approvals to go from there to Canada.
On the way, we faced many problems on those days.
One of them is a man we are calling Mauracher. Global News is not revealing how he or others got to Pakistan, only that the journey was funded by the Veterans Charity. Mauracher alone knows 30 other families in hiding in Kabul, desperately waiting to hear from Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship Canada.
They are still under threat and they are scaring, and they have lost their minds right now, and they don't know what will happen, and still they are waiting for IRCC confirmation letters.
Many don't even have a reference number.
We have now committed to welcoming 40,000 Afghan refugees to Canada.
Veterans say that promise means little if people don't have the documents and the means to leave.
The pace we're moving now, it's going to be years before we even get close to 40,000 people from Afghanistan in the country.
They want Ottawa to help facilitate and fund a way out. Mauracher says those in hiding are out of money and options.
And they are just waiting and waiting, and wait kills somebody. Please speed up their cases to get to Islamabad, to go to Canada, or from Kabul to get to Canada, because they don't have nothing right now.
Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship Canada says it has approved applications for more than 9,000 of 13,000 applicants. When it comes to sending the visas, it would only say it continues to issue documentation. Redmond Shannon, Global News, London.
Going where no drone has gone before. Next, forecasts from the eye of a hurricane. Hurricanes are meteorological monsters. We know the damage they can cause can be immense, so understanding how these storms intensify is crucial. Now, in a first-of-its-kind scientific mission, a robotic surfboard was sent into the eye of the storm. Mike Drolet reports.
Nature can be fearsome. We're not built to withstand all it offers. That makes collecting data difficult. And a new robot designed to sail within a hurricane, so very cool. Canadian storm hunter Mark Robinson has been close enough to nature to know the sail drone can go where he can't.
We can actually sort of follow the storm, get it inside storms that we wouldn't necessarily be able to get ships inside. No ship wants to be inside a hurricane.
The company that builds the sail drone says this is the first ever video from inside a hurricane taken from an untethered boat. It recorded 15-meter high waves and 150 km/h gusts, all the while taking scientific readings that should increase the accuracy of hurricane tracking models. Because with weather, every little bit of data helps. Meteorologists use satellites to see hurricanes from up high. Sensors drop from planes to measure wind speeds in the middle. But the view from below has never been accurate.
We think it's part of the missing piece of the puzzle of figuring out how hurricanes work. And the reason why is we haven't had continuous measurements within strong hurricanes.
This might seem like a new toy for meteorologists, but if it helps improve hurricane tracking accuracy, it's good for everyone. Mike Drolet, Global News, Toronto.
And that is Global National for this Friday. I'm Farah Nasser. Thank you so much for spending part of your evening with us. Tonight's Air Canada is Chickacoo Lake, west of Edmonton. Take care of yourselves and each other.